Tony, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I understand that you're in Loughton, not too distant from where I was brought up in the UK. How are things there?
That's right, very sunny, overlooking beautiful Epping Forest at the moment. So making the most of lockdown, and at least it gives me somewhere to escape to.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it's a beautiful part of the country, as there are lots of beautiful parts in the UK anyway. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about customer experience. I see you've got your slides already. Before we go into your slide deck, can you just give us a 30-second overview about you and your company, please?
Yes, I'm Tony Bowd. I run a company called Investor in Customers, and we've been going since 2006. And we work with organisations, large and small, to help them increase their profitability by attracting and retaining more customers. And we do that through helping them develop a better customer experience and also a better employee engagement, and very much linking the two and making sure we understand that what they think they're doing is what the customer believes they're actually receiving.
That's fantastic. Hey, that's exactly what we need. So let's hand over to you. Let's get on with your slides, and we'll come back to you at the end of your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So hello everyone. As I say, my name is Tony Barrett from Investor in Customers. I'm here to talk about customer experience today and also customer loyalty. Customer experience is probably the hot topic in most businesses, particularly at the moment with the pandemic, where everything is changing and people have to remain in touch and contact with their customers. Managers in all sectors are struggling with meeting their customer needs. Investor in Customers have been helping organisations improve customer experience for a while. And today we're going to share some of that information with you and some of the knowledge we've accumulated over that time. Look at the age of the customer. It's been around for a while now, the age of the customer, but also where are you on your customer experience journey? And then a couple of key areas. One is the importance of personalisation, and also talk a little about customer loyalty. And then what does good look like? And what do you need to achieve gold? At Investor in Customers, we have a award program, and gold is our top award. Around about 15% of our clients achieve gold. So how do you actually get to gold? The Forrester came up with this a while ago in terms of the age of the customer. Very much looking at the four key areas. So 100 years ago, manufacturing was the key area. Organisations produce what they could produce and then tried to find a market for it. And then distribution came through, looking at global connectivity and very much opening up some of the borders so they could look for new markets. They then moved into the age of information, and that was very much when things became much easier for people to communicate. And we're now, and have been probably for the last 8 years, in the age of the customer. And what does that mean? That means that customers really have control. They're informed. They can look at your sites, they can look at other sites. They're more demanding. They're digitally connected, and they're willing and able to switch. And I think this is one of the key areas that most organisations are focusing on now, that there is no such thing as a customer for life. But they're also not all, your competitors aren't always who they think they are, because your competitors are looking at things like response time. So we look at areas like Amazon and some of the big sites, and they're setting the expectation. How easy is it to do business with some of these organizations? They have multiple channels. So you're looking at expectation of your customers being dictated by people who you wouldn't normally see as your competitors. In most products and services, there's four key elements: the price of the product, the quality of the product or the service, the actual delivery of that service, but then the bigger thing is the whole customer experience. That's the before they engage with you, the during the engagement, and then after the engagement. And it's looking at that holistic approach is where we really much focus on customer experience. And that's made up of a number of different areas. Key thing that we find is be transparent, be honest, be open upfront, and manage those expectations from the beginning. Then we look to, with organisations, how do they actually personalise that proposition? And very important, anticipate needs. And I'll come on to that later. It's one of the key failings of most organisations. Then how do you actually exceed expectations or delight customers rather than satisfy them? And then looking at keeping the promises, actually doing what you say you're going to be doing. And then it's all about maintaining contact rather than just have I've made the sale, I'll move on. It's how do you keep that contact, and then how do you continue that relationship all the way through. So why does it matter? Lots of stats, and I don't want to get bogged down in lots of numbers and lots of stats today. I'm happy to share those with people separately, but it's a well-known fact that delighted customers are going to stay longer. They're less price sensitive, so therefore they're prepared to pay more, but they're also less expensive to maintain. They don't complain as much, they don't contact you as much, and they're also receptive to additional services. They're also more likely to recommend your business to others, and we'll talk about Net Promoter a little bit afterwards. And they'll also put up with occasional errors. They are forgiving. On the other hand, unhappy customers are receptive to switching. They're more than happy to move on to somebody else if you're not delivering what they want, and they'll leave within a year. They're also much more expensive to maintain because they're labour intensive. They're unlikely to even consider additional services, let alone buy them, and they're more likely to badmouth you, to your business to others. And quite often, around 90% of customers will talk about you to other people. And as I say, they're going to complain at every opportunity. Where are you on your customer experience journey? Every organisation that Investor in Customers works with is different. They're large organisations, small organisations. We work with companies across Europe and also now in the States and Australia. And some are quite a long way through their journey. They've really got it cracked and have got programs running for a few years. Others are right at the start. But the one thing they all have in common at the very beginning is the fact that they overestimate what they think or what they believe their customer experience is. One of the areas we look at is what's the perception of the senior management team, what's the perception of the employees, and what's the perception of the customers, and what are the gaps between the senior management think should be going on, what the employees think they're doing, and what do the customers think they're receiving. Over 70% of the managers and employees rate the customer experience they provide higher than their customers. That's not necessarily being a question of being complacent, but often it's we don't get any complaints. And we call this the ignore stage of developing a customer experience strategy. Once we can actually persuade clients, and when clients actually realise that customer experience is important and matters, we work with them in terms of exploring what is the developing part of a customer experience strategy. And again, it doesn't matter where you are on that particular area. We can join in and catch up in terms of working with the organisations where they are. To say some organisations we start working with can be some way through this. But in terms of the key processes, what do you do in terms of exploring? Well, every journey starts with knowing where you are, and initial research and preparation are a must. Running headlong into a customer experience strategy is unlikely to work. It needs to be planned and employees allowed to contribute and given time to accept the new norm. Analysing how well you currently perform and where possible comparing your results with other organisations gives you a line in the sand to measure future performance and to judge future success. However, it's important to look at all parts of the internal or the organisation, internal and external, and identify how you perform across different segments. Gathering that information is vital, and looking to compare it in terms of best practice that comes from outside the organisation. Having explored, the next area is to prepare. Once you've got an idea of where you currently stand, it's time to prepare a strategy. At IIC, we firmly believe that a good customer experience strategy is led from the top, but built from the bottom. We also recognise that customer experience covers all areas of the business, so it's vital to get engagement from each department or site, ideally appointing customer experience champions to drive and deliver the strategy. At this stage, it's also important to start mapping the customer journey from the initial engagement through to completion and then post-sale, and identify what are the key touch points and what are the opportunities to wow the customer at each point. One of the key areas there is as well is to look at the personas of those different customers. Not every customer is the same, and looking at their particular requirements is vital in terms of looking at the customer journey, so you don't slip into the failing of having a one-size-fits-all philosophy. When it comes to implementing a strategy, setting the right goals is key. Developing ambition statements, looking at where we are now, what are the gaps, but then communicating who does what and making it very clear. And one of the key areas there is differentiating between what is central and what's local. What can people on the front end, or what can people in the different departments or different sites actually do, and what needs to be done centrally. As I say, the CX champions in each of those sites can help with that, and then it's looking to bring their teams on board. And as you start implementing, look for the quick wins. There's nothing that's going to build momentum quicker than looking at some successes, because people love to be sharing in success. As the strategy begins to take shape, a great idea is to extend the network of the CX champions to all areas to ensure all bases are covered. They can identify any issues or opportunities for further improvement, and between them share good and bad practice. And it's very important to recognise that not everything is going to work immediately, and making sure that that practice can be shared, or those mistakes can be shared, so that other people don't make those same mistakes. Being brave enough to admit and share mistakes is important, to say, in making sure they don't get made again in other areas. Clearly, there's a lot of different steps within these particular journeys, but as we move the next one through is in terms of embedding the customer experience, and we believe that starts with recruitment. One of the areas that I look after at ISC is recruitment, but I tend to only do second interviews, and I only look for one thing, and that is, would I put that person I'm talking to, the person in front of me, would I put them in front of one of my customers? And we've got examples of people in our organisation who didn't have the best CV, weren't necessarily the best in interview. They had the skills, but what I believe is they had that magic spark of somebody who understood our philosophy, understood the importance of the customer, and could be important in terms of, or work with, our customers. One of the things we find there as well is aligning customer experience with employee engagement. A lot of organisations do customer surveys, a lot of organisations do employee surveys. Very few organisations actually look to join the dots and actually close that gap between what the two surveys are telling them. And that's really important in terms of reaching that tipping point where enough people in the organisation understand the requirement to be customer centric, understand the need to focus on customers, and then it becomes self-police, because they'll be actually checking that their colleagues are doing the same thing. And that can then lead on to them engaging in customer focus groups, looking at thought leadership, and developing programs which are going to be focused on the customer. In terms of the realities, there are some pitfalls. One of the mistakes that a lot of people make is that customer experience means bending over backwards to customers. Harry Selfridge many years ago came up with the customer's always right. Isn't actually something that we believe in terms of philosophy. I think the customer is always entitled to their opinion, but we all know that customers aren't always right. It's a question of managing their expectations, and it doesn't mean that just because a customer wants something, they have to have it. It's actually how you work with them and giving them a better experience. And there's also the financial implications, impact on other customers in terms of prioritizing them, whether it's sustainable, in some cases even possible. And of course, keeping customers but losing money is rarely a successful outcome. A lot of organisations also have a regulatory reality to look to, not just in terms of financial services, but a lot of organisations have strict rules and guidelines they have to follow. And sometimes the customers are unaware of these and can't understand why it is that they are being asked to do things in a certain way. Good example of that is in financial services, and particularly in terms of the rules around money laundering, where organisations have to regularly check the identity of those clients, even though they could have been working with them for a long time. One of the other key areas around there, particularly in financial services, is the thin line between help and advice. Customer experience strategy is very much around how do I make sure I can give the best help I can to that customer, but sometimes that can actually slip into giving advice. And within the financial services sector, you have to be qualified to give advice. So it's very difficult to pull yourself back when the customer asks you what you should do, not slip into that or fall into the trap of moving into actually giving them advice. One of the other areas, and as an organisation that was built on customer surveys and assessments, one of the areas they were very conscious of is there can be the analysis paralysis and the death by data. A lot of organisations look at a lot of different ways of doing things, and customers and employees will get fed up if you don't understand the results and act upon those results. It's also very important to impartially evaluate them, so you're not reading into the results what you think or what you want to hear. But the most important part is, if you have this information, take action, use it. Insights and customer surveys, employee surveys should be the means to the end. They shouldn't be the end in themselves, and they should lead to an outcome. One of the areas I talked earlier was around personalisation, and that's very critical in terms of looking at those different personas on the customer journey and making sure that organisations, or whether it's business to business or business to consumer, you actually understand what it is. In customer experience, there's no such thing as one size fits all. Every customer is different, with varying degrees of knowledge and experience and vastly different expectations. One of the key areas that can be different is around the different generations. You can see on the slide here that the 5 main generations through to traditionalist baby boomers, they are very different. They have different aspirations. They have a different educational experience. They've been brought up in a different way in terms of what formulated their experiences, and they have different attitudes. And this is true not just of external customers, but also in terms of employees. It's important that customer journeys are mapped for all personas or the customer types and their chosen channel and their preferred way of doing business. But it's also essential that internal customers are taken into account. Customers expect a seamless experience across all channels, whilst frontline employees can make or break a positive customer experience, and those behind the scenes can also have a significant impact. Operational metrics can identify segments and help to develop processes that are efficient without sacrificing a positive customer experience. Disparate IT systems can also complicate processes. One of the key areas we find a lot of employees say is, oh, we need a better CRM system. That's actually more about culture. That's more about building up the sharing information, being able to put information and breaking down organizational silos. But CRM systems are vital in terms of handover points and making sure that customers don't have to go the same rigmarole of providing information every time they talk to somebody in the organization. Thought about loyalty. What is it that drives customer loyalty? We've all heard about Net Promoter and the importance in terms of the ultimate question. Fred Reichhelt's work with Bain & Co., which is how likely are you to recommend your product or your service to somebody else? And that really is an indicator of loyalty. And we work with a number of organizations on Net Promoter programs to look at that and really drive not just understanding who are the loyal customers, but what does that actually mean? What is actually driving their satisfaction or driving their dissatisfaction? And within loyalty, there's a few areas to look at there. And I think one of the key things about loyalty is customer loyalty is not the same as retention. We work with organizations who've got huge great customer retention rates, but sometimes not customer loyalty. And that's where they've got a product or a service which actually is quite difficult to switch or complicated. We worked with one organization which was a payroll company. where their customer loss rate was virtually nil. But actually the reason for that was because it was so hard to move their payroll service to another one that nobody wanted to be the person to actually drive that. Empowering staff to act and giving them the tools to do their job effectively and the knowledge that they will be supported is also key. So solving a customer's problem makes a real difference, but staff can only do that when they know that they're going to be empowered, they're able to look at it, especially when it isn't actually your fault. And that can really build up loyalty in terms of, even if a customer's made a mistake, actually helping them. One of the key areas there is that as well, is that simple changes can make a big difference. It's not all about finding the game changes and not always finding the key things, the big changes are going to make a difference. Sometimes just helping them, just little changes, suggesting ideas. And that's the fourth one there in terms of customers need more help and information than they often realise. We talked earlier about anticipating needs. One of the areas that we find with organisations that score lowest is failing to anticipate customer needs, failing to actually look beyond the face value or the surface of what the customer wants. And most organisations, customers actually don't know as much as they think they do. And sometimes it's very useful to actually say, well, have you thought about this? Look for other things that they could be doing. And then there's also the difference in most organisations, and this again is where we find the connection between employee engagement and customer loyalty or customer satisfaction. And that's around the difference between attitude and empowerment in driving employee action. Quite often we find that within the work we do, that the senior teams and the employees are aware of some of the issues that are impacting on customers and some of the issues that are driving it. And it's very important to understand what's actually stopping them making a difference. Is it attitude, where they could do something but they choose not to? Or is it empowerment, where they feel that even if they'd like to, they don't feel sufficiently empowered and have confidence in their management team to support them in terms of doing things? So it's easy to just pass it on to somebody else. Contact centres are key in this, particularly in terms of trying to find the balance between being on the phone and the artificial intelligence and the chatbots that come out. And here's an example actually of just one that happened very recently to me with an organisation in just some of the how not to do it. So this is a transcript from a message I had when my account became locked. And there's 4 key areas that have failed here in what was literally a conversation or an email conversation in less than a minute. Failure to listen. I've already said that my account's locked. What's going to be done about it? And I just get a fact that we're going to send an email address. Well, I've already told them that the email address hadn't arisen. Not anticipating needs. There's a line there that says if you can call us so we can verify the account. Well, it would be quite useful to actually give me the number on what I need to call. Third one, the third key point there is not qualifying. So this is one where it was an organisation where I'm there as both an employee and as an employer. They gave me the number for employees. Then they decided, oh, I better just check, is it for an employer? So they didn't actually find out what I wanted in the first place. And then it's seeing things through. So there was nothing in the dialogue where the person that I was engaged with made any attempt to give me a number that I could call back on, time to contact them, or even say, I'm going to follow up to make sure this happens. So in a very short exchange, there were 4 key mistakes there in terms of good customer experience. What is it that organisations need to do to get a gold IIC award, but to actually get best practice in terms of customer experience? Talked earlier about making it personal. One of the pieces of customer feedback we get most often is that I'm a number, I'm a person rather than not a number. Customers like to be treated as individuals and know that their particular needs are understood. Customer experience is like an iceberg. The main part of it is applicable to everyone, but is hidden below the water or the depths of the organisation. The most important part above the water is clearly visible, And customers want to believe that the service they receive has been tailored just for them. That then helps build relationships with those customers where they can actually understand and believe you have their best interests at heart. It's also important that that's consistent across the whole organisation. So it doesn't matter which part of the company they're touching base with, whether it's on one channel or another, and it's important to have that choice of channels. That consistency is seen all the way through. I mentioned earlier about Amazon and some of these other organisations who set expectations. If I did a quick poll now and asked how many of you compete with Amazon, the result will probably be quite low. But in fact, we all do. Not just with Amazon, but with all of the great exponents of customer experience. They set the bar in terms of what customers expect for delivery or response times to handling complaints. And they raise that bar every year. So it's not just sufficient to be good now. It's looking at how you can improve and have that continued improvement all the way through. Staff need to understand what they can do and when they can do it, and establish and agree guidelines up front so customers know what to expect. And first contact resolution is important. So empowering employees to take action early is critical, as is encouraging them to be flexible and look for alternatives rather than hiding behind their computer or GDPR or health and safety or any other things that make it easy to say no. Again, a lot of customer interaction is over the phone, and it's really important to listen actively. Listening should be easy. After all, it's something we all do naturally, but there are guidelines to follow. Focus on what the customer is actually saying. Don't be distracted. Don't interrupt. Don't rush the caller. Allow them to get things off their chest. Allow them to actually have their say. I think one of the key areas, again, we find from organisations where they say, very much in terms of the contact centre or the person I was talking to, we're trying to rush the call. And actually we see that from the other side, where there's a lot of organisations, the employees feel under pressure to get calls through, particularly in high volume of calls, try and get the calls completed as quickly as possible. And actually you have to put that customer at ease. You have to give them time. It's also very important to empathise. Put yourselves in their shoes, try to understand where they are. Be patient with them. I think it's controlling the call, but not rushing it. And then one of the key areas is remaining impartial. One of the sectors we do a lot of work with is around credit control, working with organisations who deal with people who have debt. It's very, very easy to start being judgmental in those situations, where it's an actual fact the really high proponents and the really successful customer experience organisations remain impartial. And then finally, what's behind the words? I mentioned earlier that not every customer knows everything, and quite often what they're asking for isn't actually what they want. So try and get the meaning, try and get the feeling of what they require, the emotion of that they require, what is it they actually need, as opposed to what they're asking for. No is not an answer, and again, this is an area that we find with customers in particular. Obviously, in some cases, you can't actually provide what they want, or you can't actually answer their question or solve them. But be honest, be upfront. The key areas there is people would much rather hear them say, well, actually, I don't know the answer to that, I'll go and find it, or we can't do that, but we can do this. And so look for and suggest alternatives. Ask, is there anything else that could be done? And also, don't be afraid to recommend someone else. Not every organisation can supply every particular need, but it could be that by passing them information on to somebody who can help them, might be outside the organisation, might even be with a competitor. That actually starts building loyalty. That starts people saying, actually, that was an honest answer. That was an honest organisation. I'll go back to them next time I have a problem, or next time I want something. I'll go back to them because they helped me. And finally, in terms of success, or what does good look like, recognise success and learn from failure. There's a saying in management about catching people doing things right. A lot of managers look for mistakes. They look to try and hone in on areas where people fail or people are doing things wrong. But actually, it's catching people doing things right, recognising that, rewarding that. And reward doesn't necessarily mean monetary reward. Quite often, it can just be patting them on the back, or sending them an email thanking them. and it's looking there in terms of actually that gets them to do things. So they know that it's been successful and people have recognised that success, and they'll do it again. And they'll also talk to other colleagues and get them to share that practice. But it's also good to look at good and bad projects. I've worked for a number of organisations, or with a number of organisations, and if something goes wrong, often there's a huge in-depth inquiry around what actually failed in that project. Very rarely do organisations look back at good projects and say, well, what did we learn from that? What can we do in that in terms of learning? What can we do in terms of that of achieving? And actually, even though it went well, could we have done it better? As I say, being brave, sharing and learning from good and bad experiences, and being brave enough to share those experiences with other people within the organisation can be critical, so that you can start building up what works, what doesn't work. We talked earlier about recruitment in terms of customer experience being seen in the as part of the strategy of once it's embedded, it goes into for the interview process, it goes through to the training. And we look at it in terms of three very easy things in terms of good customer experience. In the end, it all boils down to making sure you've got the right people doing the right thing at the right time. And if you can achieve that, not only will you deliver a much better customer experience, but you'll have a much better and more motivated and engaged employees. Thank you. How's that?
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, I liked a lot of the points that you put on. In fact, I liked all the points that you put on there. There's a lot of lessons that we can all take away. So I wanted to thank you from everybody at Contact Center World for sharing those points and taking us through some really, really insightful thoughts, ideas and comments. So on behalf of everybody at Contact Center World, I want to wish you the best. Want you to stay safe, my friend. And you know, I know the part of the world where you're living in, it's nice down there. Please enjoy the sunshine and the Epping Forest as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you. Thanks very much.